Hello, Leigh here. The election is what feels like moments away, and I, for one, am stressed. However, what Fi and I decided to do to kind of assuage our anxiety is that we are going to host a fun little election night live stream party. So if you would be interested in joining us, it's going to be on our Patreon at 1 a.m. UK time, and that is 8 p.m. East Coast time, 5 p.m. West Coast USA. So we are very excited. We would love to have a little chat, meet some of you on our live stream on Patreon. So do go and check it out on Queer Gals Watch at patreon.com. You can also find all of the details on our social media, which is at Queer Gals Watch. Hopefully we can all kind of huddle together in cyberspace and hold each other through the anxiety. We would love to see you there.
We breathe, we center. Hello, Leigh.
Hello.
You're joining us, listeners, straight after lunch, which actually I think is quite a fun vibe.
Straight after lunch, straight before the election.
Yeah.
So the guts are in turmoil.
Yeah. Leigh has confidently, was it your little CBD drink?
Yeah, I've got some CBD.
It's necessary. Amazing. Well, welcome everyone to episode 3, season 2 of Queer Gals Watch the West Wing.
We are westing and we are winging.
We are winging. I think we're on a wing and a prayer here. We really are. But we're here to discuss, more importantly, episode 3 of season 2 of the West Wing, which is the midterms.
The midterms. A word, a phrase that will put the fear of God into any politician.
Yeah, and a word which I don't know anything about.
Well, that's not what we're covering today. So let me just give you a quick...
Well, I think I'm going to try and answer this because...
Talk me through it.
So, this means that 1, we're halfway through Bartlett's administration.
Yes.
It happens 2 years in.
Yes.
And it's elections in Congress and the Senate?
In the House of Representatives and in the Senate. So collectively, in Congress.
Ah, yes, the two houses. And so it's not because not everyone is being re-elected. There's a portion.
It is everyone in the House of Representatives because they serve for 2 years at a time.
Right.
And it is a third of the Senate because the senators have 6-year terms.
Yes. Okay. And the reason why this is important is because we might, quote unquote, lose the House.
Yes. Which
would mean it will be harder for us to, by us I mean the Bartlett administration, to pass whatever laws they wish to pass.
That is correct. And most presidents take a real beating in the first midterms because they've kind of been riding high on getting elected. And then obviously the public starts to be like, but you're not the second coming.
You haven't given us everything you said you would.
You haven't followed through on all the things you said you were going to do. And so then inevitably it often swings in the favour of the opposing party at the midterms.
That's what I thought. Okay, cool. Well, I did better on that than I thought. So, shall we justly delve in?
Let's dive in.
Dive into the episode recap. So, today we'll be discussing episode 3, the midterms. And the previously on is giving heavy indication that this episode will still be covering the shooting, but perhaps giving us a little bit more about Charlie's experience processing the information from Ron that, in fact, he was the intended target.
With the 0 aftercare.
0, simply just, we didn't then see him for the rest of the episode, I don't think. Now, in a classic fashion, we open on Josh lecturing CJ via speakerphone. From his hospital bed.
We love to see it.
I expected nothing less from this man.
This is the scrappy Josh Lyman energy that we opened season 1 with.
The workaholic.
He lost his way slightly with the chaos of Mandy and Joey Lucas, but where he's finding his way back to who he truly is, which is a scrappy, all-in guy.
And he's just making it work, you know. He's just like, wherever he is, that's his office.
Truly.
You know? We'll take a moment, though, for CJ in her powder blue suit with the like a loose collar white shirt.
It's stunning, short-sleeved white blouse.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's really nice. The collar of the blouse especially. Wow, gorgeous.
Gorgeous girls.
Now, Leigh, I will say that CJ is feeling quite frisky and free.
She is.
At the top of this ep because she's full naming everyone. So we get a little Joshua. And we also get a full naming of Leo.
I was not ready for the lore drop of Leopold.
No, frankly.
Leopold. I think in my mind he was a Leonard.
I was literally going to say, I was thinking Leonard.
Leopold I did not see coming.
No. There's also business in the opening of this episode.
Yes.
So I'm just assuming this is just kind of general midterms energy. There's also like people talking about like big policy and like national interest stuff, like politics biz. Just generally, I think people being like, let's start making some noise about these things that will help like get the general public thinking about how well we're doing on X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Now, CJ is, I think, because we're in this kind of like midterms chaos, is really like, I think, processing her trauma by throwing herself entirely into her work.
Now, Fiona, does that
I don't know
feel
what you mean.
familiar in any way?
I couldn't possibly comment
Does
on
that ring any bells?
I couldn't possibly comment. Now, what I will say is something I would never do is when Sam Seaborn like catches CJ in the corridor, she just goes, "Holy interruptus, Batman."
That was crazy. That was a disservice to Claudia Jean. She is wittier than that.
Now, you know that often the writers will give Alison Janney a line that no one has any right to pull off.
And yet she somehow does, but still it feels like a disservice.
I feel like this one has been the wobbliest of them.
That's been like she has the least leg to stand on.
Alison's not even confident in that one.
No.
But fuck me, is she good at her job?
Yeah, truly.
CJ is thriving.
It's lovely to see her back on her game.
Exactly. And I feel like perhaps at a toxic level, but like she is just like riding that wave.
Yeah.
Like the press corps in the palm of her hand.
Yeah.
In terms of Josh's like getting better, we feel like he's bedbound, but working.
My conclusion was that this episode must actually take place over quite a long period of time.
Yeah, because we've got, in terms of like the campaigns for Congress people, it feels like there are some people being tipped in this episode, and then we're seeing election night.
And they do like such and such weeks to the midterms. I
think it's over a period of maybe 3 months.
It feels like which is such a long time, because normally it's like a
Hours.
day, the next day. So we're very much speeding through Josh Lyman's recovery. It feels very much akin to the twilight moment when she's sitting looking out of the window and the camera simply revolves around her as the seasons change.
Yeah. If anything, I feel that they were inspired.
Josh Lyman is Bella Swan.
In many ways. He does give Bella Swan energy. I really don't know where we go from there as a comment. Anyway, to business in the Roosevelt Room.
Yeah.
The comment from Leigh in the shed doc being, who'd have thought getting shot at would make your approval ratings jump?
No space for conspiracy theories.
Simply no space.
At Queer Girls Watch.
No. However, I feel that quite a lot of the dialogue surrounding stuff in this episode is going to be reasonably triggering to recent events in America.
Yeah.
I wanted to know that, like, I'm surprised that Jed is back at work so quickly, because he's had like an abdominal gunshot wound, so I think it's gonna be like quite a lot of muscle damage.
An abdominal gunshot wound with quite a serious pre-existing condition, lest we forget.
And he's older.
Yeah.
I would have thought that he wouldn't be back at work. Obviously, for dramatic reasons, he must have had a miraculous recovery. But just like, I didn't see anything, and I would never put this at Martin Sheen's door. But I saw no physical storytelling of a man recovering from a gunshot wound.
Oh, wow. Fi is coming for Martin Sheen, everyone.
I'm just saying, like, I wouldn't...
America's granddad himself.
I'm just saying, like, a change in his gait, an adjustment to posture, a reference in breath.
That would be your director's note to Martin Sheen.
That would just be my note. Something to mull over. To things that are less important, just feel like the costume department are finding their stride.
Truly, I think it's like we had kind of less character-led costuming in season 1. It felt like we were all glam, political operatives. Whereas I feel like more and more so as time goes on, we're really seeing like character-driven costuming that's doing like so much fun physical story, like visual storytelling.
Even in the guys as well, because I feel like I was just like, oh, they all wear suits. But then when I was really looking at it, I was like, Sam always wears a very specific like cut of suit. And like the way in which he walks in it, I'm like, you've chosen that suit because you're like, I feel good in this. This is one of my like, I'm a workman. I've got my like nice briefcase. I feel like Toby Ziegler literally is like, fuck, I didn't do dry cleaning.
Yes.
I'm going to grab this. I mean, it doesn't really fit like I've lost weight or I've gained weight.
Toby's clothes are like so much more lived in, I feel.
Since Andy left, I haven't bought any clothes.
I feel like Sam refreshes his capsule wardrobe once every season.
He buys statement pieces. I just think he should be a gay character.
He is kind of written that way.
Not because he likes clothes. That sounds very like derivative of me. But there's just something about his attention to detail in certain facets of his life.
He is quite camp.
He's quite camp. The thing is, I think because, and maybe it's a Rob Lowe thing, but like he's very comfortable in his body. And for me, I'm just like, there's like a sense of pride in that, where it's like, he's like, oh no, I know who I am and I know what I like. And like when he does weird shit, like talk about maps, he's like, oh, I don't mind if that makes you uncomfortable.
Your teeth are your best friends, CJ.
You take care of them, they'll take care of you. I don't know. I guess he's just...
There's a quality.
There's a quality. Okay. That's all we'll say on the matter.
I'm claiming Sam for our team.
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe it's just because I'm scared that he's going to upset me when I've grown to love him so much.
Yeah.
Such a big sigh then. Yeah. Christ. Okay, so the thing that they're discussing in the Roosevelt Room is, and this is what I took from it, so correct me if I'm wrong. So it feels like we're discussing where in the country we're weak. By we mean the Democrats. And that would be about how we're getting money to candidates there, but we can't give them money. But can we make calls and be like, you should really support so-and-so?
So the issue is, which is kind of a theme throughout this episode, is that you can't campaign from the West Wing. So like even if a president is running for re-election, they have to have a separate campaign staff to their staff in the West Wing. It all has to be very separate, and that's very important. And obviously, Jed Bartlett is the president, but he's not the chair of the Democratic National Committee, the DNC. So he ultimately is not the person who decides which Democratic candidates get more funding from the DNC.
No. So this is my kind of stupid question. How does Bartlett help people to win their midterms?
So first of all, he can endorse them, obviously, especially if they're like running against another candidate from the Democratic Party. He can speak on their behalf. He can have a photo op with them to make them look like, you know, they, etc. And he can kind of go to the DNC and be like, I think this person is deserving of X, Y, and Z. But ultimately, he would not be the final decision maker with anything, how the DNC's resources are allocated.
Okay, that makes sense. Just a moment of conjecture, which is we have a small cutaway scene where Charlie is on the phone trying to actively have a phone call with someone, and Margaret is just talking at him like a lunatic. And that's just like a scene. Yeah. Her hair looks fantastic in that scene though. Like different from the usual flicky bob, like kind of more of like a soft blow dry. I thought it was fantastic. Should we have a relationship check-in with Charlie and Zoe?
Yes.
So I think, understandably, Charlie is struggling with the news from Ron. I think he's freezing Zoe out because she's like, I called you and you didn't call me back. And like, what's going on? And like, you've been so distant lately. Also, fun fact that we learned is that they've been together 9 months.
Which is a big deal at a kind of 19 to 21-year-old age frame of time. It's certainly longer than any relationship I had during that time in my life.
I just feel like it's a really tough time because you're not grown-ups yet.
Yes.
And something really grown-up has happened.
Yes.
And like, I don't think, understandably, either of them quite have the like words.
Where do you even begin?
Yeah.
Where do you even begin as Zoe Bartlett, as a 19-year-old, to be like, you were a target of violence because you're my boyfriend?
Yeah.
On like a national scale.
And I do think that like, it seems like something that we've heard from Zoe and from Jed before is like, but it doesn't matter to us, Charlie. And I think that feels like that's where the nub of this argument between the two of them is, which is she's like, well, I don't care that they thought that because I care about you so much and I want to be with you.
Yeah.
And I think he's like, but I need you to give me space to care about the fact that that happened. Because I think everyone's like, well, we're not, like, we're sorry that that happened, but like, we're cool with you dating Zoe. But he's like, no, but I don't know if I'm cool with dating Zoe now because it's put other people in danger.
Yes. And I would say, you know, we're obviously in a pre-Black Lives Matter movement world with this. And I would just point people in the direction of, because obviously like Zoe does not have necessarily the knowledge to like navigate this conversation being in a mixed race relationship.
Yeah.
And I would just say that in the during Black Lives Matter movement that we are currently in, I would just point people in the direction of two of the books that I really enjoyed that I felt like really educated me on this important subject was Don't Touch My Hair by Emma Dabiri, which is, especially if there's any Irish listeners, she speaks about being like Black and Irish, which feels like a really important conversation and not something that is like discussed to any way the level that it should. And of course, like Why I No Longer Talk to White People About Race, I also think is an incredible book. Those were just two that I happened to read that I would say if you're looking to like educate yourself about how to deal with these situations when they come up in life with the Black people in your life and you want to be the best ally that you can possibly be. Those were two books that I found really instructive and helpful.
Yeah. I hope that they're going to be okay.
I hope so too. I mean, I think like there's so much goodwill on both sides to be like, obviously there's always going to be a gap in that relationship in that she's never going to understand what it is to be a Black man.
Yeah.
But I think there is like a willingness on Zoe's part to be like, I get that I don't get that.
Yeah. I would love to not do such a hard gear shift, but I am going to do one because there is a running story of Bartlett being incredibly petty in this episode. So, someone called Elliot Rous, who Bartlett once beat in a congressional race, is running for a school board position in the area where like Jed and Abby used to live. And Jed is like, I don't want him to have success. And that is crazy bitch behavior.
It's, you know what, though? I get it. You know what? Some rivalries
just
run
never
deep.
die. They just never die. And I just love the fact that he's like, I know it was a long time ago, but like, I always want him to lose.
And I can do nothing but respect that.
I think what is happening here is just that Leigh's admitting that she has some nemesis. Nemesises?
I will not speak their names. It is very difficult to get onto my list. I will just say it's not just something that I like walk around willy-nilly deciding people are my enemies. That's not something that happens. I will just say there are lines in the sand that once crossed, there's no going back.
I appreciate that from you. I think that people can sleep comfortably in their beds tonight.
I'm not a mean person. There's just some people that are just on, there was thin ice and they fell through it.
And you're just going to keep skating on by. For some reason, we're going to meet Sam's college friend, Tom, who is giving jock vibes. And it turns out that Sam is grooming Tom for Congress.
Grooming Tom.
But you know what I mean? He's like, oh, I invited you and your wife to the White House. Oh, and they're like, why are we here? And Sam's like, well, I don't know. Maybe it's because like you've done this in your life and you've done this in your life. And I think Tom is a DA.
Yes.
And he's like, you would be a great candidate for Congress, you know, if you like wanted to run or something. Okay, time jump.
Yes.
Aggressive time jump. We are now 9 weeks out from the election day, midterm day.
Bonnie's suit is simply a wow.
She's wearing like this like quite bold blue suit. And I'm just going to say it's giving DNC. It's giving I'm a Democrat.
It truly is. It's very, and I mean this in like the absolute best way possible. It's very Dr. Jill Biden for me.
Yes. Oh my God, yeah, it's something that would be in her wardrobe. Also, I would say an honourable mention to an amazing outfit that Donna has in these like few scenes as well. She's wearing like a collarless skirt suit.
It's so good.
It's really
love
good.
it. I love that like collarless 90s look.
With the buttons. It's really nice.
It's really
She
good.
looks great in it.
It also fits her impeccably.
Yeah. Donna, it seems, has just been at Josh's beck and call through this. Like, there's a lot of dialogue about her like taking stuff to and from the West Wing to him. He's on bed rest at home and like bringing him food. Now, Leigh, the question I have is, how has this been going down at the girly house share?
I think the girls are out here being like, I get that he got shot, okay? And I get that I get that was a big deal for him. But like, does he not have other friends?
Is there not someone else he could call?
You are ultimately, Donna, an employee. We need to talk about boundaries. Are you getting paid overtime for doing this?
Couldn't agree more. And we know she's not getting paid overtime. And we know there's been one or two moments where she's been like, oh, it's so late. And he's been like, you can crash on the couch.
And you know there's also been times where he's been like high on pain meds and tried to kiss her. I see that happening. And then Donna being like, no, this is not how this moment is going to happen.
I think there's been a lot of like him being high on pain meds and like holding her hand and just being like, I care about you so much. You mean so much to me. And her being like, I'm gonna...
Not you just recounting how you and Dan got together.
I just want the record to state it's
saying, you mean so much to me, and being like, me being like, he's in love.
I just like to say that neither of us were high on pain meds at that time.
No, that is very important to note. I can confirm, corroborate.
Thank
yes.
you. But yeah, I see that, and I see like her having to like extricate herself and be like, go home, go home, go home, go home. Don't stay, go home. I think it has been wild at the girly house share.
I think all of the girls have been gossiping behind Donna's back.
And I think one of them has been like, you've crossed a line. And actually is just like being frosty with her.
She's fallen out with one of them for sure.
Yeah.
And Donna's been like, you turn your back on me in the hardest moment of my life.
Shot.
When the love of my life has just been shot.
Anyway, moving on. Zoe drops in on Leo because she's looking for her dad, as per usual. Everyone's always looking for Jed Bartlett. We should know where the president is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would just like to mention that this season is going to be tough on Zoe from a fashion perspective. She's in like a horrible like brown. It was the era of brown, the early 2000s brown.
Why? It was such a moment of like, let's pair brown and aqua blue.
Yeah, that's made me feel physically nauseous.
And it's coming back.
I can't speak of that right now. I just can't get into it.
Along with the like little ribbon belts.
The chunky belts.
Yeah.
I can't. It's still too soon. The quote I did enjoy from that scene was Leo describes Jed as, he says, because your father is a demented man. And I just think the repetition of demented,
I love that.
It speaks volumes for me of their friendship. But I want to come back to Jed's pettiness. I think it's CJ that is talking to him. She's trying to talk to him. He's on the phone, actively trying to
sabotage
this man's campaign for a local school board position. CJ says, sir, do you think you're obsessed with this race? And he just responds with, can you believe I'm on hold? But what he does mention is he's like, it's the school that all three of my daughters went to.
It's the school district that all three daughters went to. Crucially, 3. What did I say? I predicted it was going to be specifically a household of 3 daughters.
3 daughters, Zoe being the youngest.
A Powerpuff Girls of daughters, if you will.
But will we ever learn their names?
Who knows who they are, where they are, what they do.
Here's to the, now we know 2 unnamed.
To the 2 elder Bartlett daughters, never to be mentioned.
I just want to meet the eldest one.
I know. I want to meet the eldest Bartlett daughter.
Another fantastic Jed quote from this, when he's talking about the school district, he's like, for which I have personally baked things to raise money. But yeah, Bartlett's personal vendettas aside, let's touch base now that we're like further down the election campaign road with Tom, the jock, and our kind of gut feelings of just like him and his wife are like
Quite bland.
Quite bland people. Now, we were correct to trust these gut feelings, Leigh, because in his work as a DA, he has perhaps been exploiting, let's say, the public's racist opinions.
By stacking the juries
With white-
of black defendants with
white jurors.
all white jurors.
Not a good look.
No.
So, one, Sam is grappling with the fact that, his friend is a racist.
Which, you know what? It's an important thing to confront.
Yeah, exactly. And also that from this point onwards, basically Leo's like, unfortunately, we're cutting support. He'll get no more endorsements from Bartlett. He's basically going to get nothing from the White House. And then it's kind of up to the DNC what they want to do with that information. Grim.
Very grim.
A Charlie check-in. Now, Jed is being very kind of evasive. He's got to make some calls about the congressional races. So he obviously has to, he can't do those at work, as he said. He has to, go to the residence to do those. And he's been putting them off. And Charlie just says to him, why don't you just make the damn calls? And, as he says damn, he, catches himself. And Jed, looks at him.
So good.
Jed's just, doesn't say anything.
Doesn't reproach him.
But just, carries on, with a knowing look. A hard stare. And I don't like seeing Charlie like this.
No. I think it's completely understandable given what he's been through and the situation that he finds himself in. I think any young man or a person of any gender for that matter would...
it's crazy that he's at work.
Yeah.
And that he's just carried on working. He hasn't had any time or potentially, I imagine, what, we had 2001, there is some talk of, offering mental health support later in the episode, but no one's we should talk to Charlie and see if he's doing
it's
okay.
crazy that it's not specifically with Charlie in mind. His mum died quite recently from a gunshot wound, and now he has been shot at.
Yeah.
And at no point are we that's probably the most triggering thing that possibly could have happened to him.
And his girlfriend's dad got shot with a bullet that was supposed to be for him, and one of his mentors got shot and was gravely injured with a bullet that was meant for him. What does happen in this episode is, so Charlie's been organising some tech support for Mrs. Landingham. Very cute. And he leaves this kind of quite terse encounter with Jed and finds just a child alone, a little...
Maybe the cutest child that's ever lived.
Now, what I love a little outspoken child character where they're hello, my name's Jeffrey. Who are you? And I'm well, you're just cute. So there's this little kid in the Roosevelt Room, and Charlie goes in and he's basically where is your adult? And this little kid's
are you a cabinet secretary?
Yeah.
No, I'm Jeffrey.
Immediately, Leigh and I are texting each other being I love Jeffrey. But Jeffrey's full name is Jeffrey Mackintosh because Jeffrey's dad is the tech support guy who is a young black man and his son is also black. And I feel there's this kind of moment where Charlie is watching them together and I think he's doing some processing about family and perhaps maybe some reflection on support and the fact that he is someone who doesn't have any living parents. And you said in our notes, do you think Charlie needs to do some healing work on his inner child? And I think, from my very humble and uninformed opinion, yes.
Yeah, because he's still a kid in many ways himself. But obviously, the minute that you lose a parent, regardless of what age, and then the minute you become a caregiver for your younger sibling, your childhood is over. You know?
And I just need to know that someone's looking after Charlie. I think I need that scene where he's going out for lunch, even having a hurried lunch on the hoof with his sister.
Yeah, I do also just feel I think it's great that Charlie has so many mentors. I think his character deserves to have a black mentor that he can also connect with in that slightly different way.
Yeah.
Than he can with his white colleagues.
100%. There isn't that regular character that exists currently. So this is us manifesting for the show, that character for Charlie. Unfortunately, let's go back to Tom. Things have gotten worse for him in that news has come that he was in an all-white fraternity. Sam does a bit of yeah, but there are black fraternities and white fraternities. And he's like, but it doesn't necessarily mean, and like Leo's like, just stop and just think about what you're saying.
Yeah.
So as Sam confronts the fact that he may have internalized racism as well.
Which we all do to a greater or lesser extent.
For sure.
Yeah.
Josh is in fact confronting his own death.
He is. I don't love the fact that I can see that Josh is like sweating.
Yeah, he's like striding around in his room at home, like sweating. And I think, okay, so I put a question where I was just like, why is he so sweaty? And then I wonder if it's because like, obviously if you've been bedbound, you're going to have lost all of your stamina. And like, if you've had like internal, so like you will basically be coming from zero stamina. So like, you know, like getting up and walking to the bathroom or like to go and get yourself a glass of water could be like the most difficult thing you do that day.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe that. But it just seems like he's come back from a run, which he obviously hasn't done, but crazy. I would like us to check in also with Toby. This is kind of an episode where everyone's mental health is a little bit on the edge. So Toby has become hyper fixated on pursuing like terrorist cells within the United States.
Yeah, and listen, you've been through a trauma. I get that.
What we did need was his old friend CJ.
Truly, to come in looking like a 1940s pinup of yesteryear.
She looks
The
great.
shoulder pads are stunning on her.
Great blowout. And she's just basically like, Toby, I just think that we've lost focus. You don't work for the FBI.
No.
I think you're director of communications and you've been avoiding responsibilities. And I feel like now I know their backstory. It makes sense why she can talk to him in that way. Like, be so direct and just be like, dude.
Unfortunately, this is not your responsibility.
You need to turn up.
Yeah.
Like, you're letting things slip. Now, then Toby lets himself feel some feelings. And he
At CJ.
Yeah. Which I feel is kind of coming from, again, the fact that he's like, you're a safe person for me to like let this out to.
That's when you know that you have like unconditional love from someone where you're like, I can be my worst self with you.
It's so that. And they like have this kind of shouting match where Toby's just like, it's not good enough though. Like, I don't want to stop doing this. I want to find every person that was involved in this or every person that knew anything about this, and I want them to get got.
Yeah. And I think we can't underestimate the fact that Toby was the person who found Josh. And I think that is a unique trauma in and of itself.
Yeah. And Charlie is witness to this kind of showdown between the two of them.
And that feels important because I feel like it's good for him to witness an older man, mentor figure, feel his feelings.
Yeah.
It's good to see a man who he respects processing his trauma at somebody that he clearly feels like emotionally safe with. And also just to see that like other people are also struggling in the aftermath of this feels really important.
Yeah, I feel like in this episode, we're really seeing the fact that like mental health is a really broad church and that everyone is responding to this traumatic event in really different ways. And everyone's got an opinion on how everyone else is dealing with it. But no one's really...
It's so a death in the family, isn't it?
Yeah, but no one's looking at how they're behaving in any way. But why, Leigh, focus on this hugely worthy story when we could instead talk about the school board elections?
I just love that Bartlett is a petty bitch. It's my favourite character detail about him.
He is like led on his bed in the residence and CJ has come to talk to him. And he's asking her like, he's like, you know about the news, CJ. Like, why hasn't this made the national news?
Why hasn't this school board race
made the national news? And then she's like, well, why don't you focus like on like Congress and the elections that are coming back? Like, you know, we want to like make sure that we're in a really good position and we want to make sure that like we win the House. And he just says, I don't care about winning back the House.
Said no president ever.
Ever. Like, I love when he's being this petty.
Yeah.
Like, he's just being super grumpy.
I mean, CJ is truly like every millennial and Gen Zer speaking to their crazy uncle in this scene. And that is why she is every woman. She's like the person who's trapped at Christmas dinner being like, no, so the reason we can't say that is...
Like, honestly, and it's even the tempo of her delivery is like, and then this is how we know that this is wrong. They're kind of like going back and forth about how frustrating the whole thing is. And CJ just says like, then that's the way it is. Which kind of sums up my feelings about politics at the moment, which is like, oh, doesn't it feel like we're putting all of our emotional strength and intelligence and everything we have into something, but like the way it is the way it'll be.
And then she says, in a democracy, oftentimes other people win. Oh dear God, CJ. Not this year. Not in 2024.
Slightly too real for me right now. And like, she's talking about school board election, but we're talking about the presidential election, perhaps in the United States. It made me want to scream, cry, and then throw up.
Yeah. To election day?
Yeah, another time jump. And of course, in a classic Aaron Sorkin decision, there's a storm.
There's a storm, naturally. It is the fury of God's own thunder coming to rain down on the midterms.
Speaking of that, let's circle back to Tom and his wife, Sarah.
His bland wife, Sarah.
His bland wife, and them like cornering Sam in the West Wing. And no, Tom wasn't angry. It was Sarah. Sarah really gives it to him.
She really does. She's really bringing the drama here.
It's like there's like thunder and then there's like lightning flashing and this pregnant woman is just laying into Sam Seaborn.
It's giving me the genre iconography of like Frankenstein, horror,
The
just
Craft.
for a single scene.
Yeah. I quite hear for Sam feeling very threatened by an angry pregnant woman.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's stunning to see.
I do wonder though, like, should Sam have called Tom? Like, he just ghosted him. Like, the White House ghosted him.
I kind of do feel like it was worth a phone call off the record from Sam being like, listen, I'm going to level with you. Unfortunately, we're having to pull our support because of the following things that have come to light.
Yeah. Because it just feels like being ghosted by the White House is kind of an insane thing.
Yeah.
Some quick conjecture, just while we're here. This has been a crazy episode.
We've covered so much time.
But I also need to just be like, what the fuck is happening? Because I know, like, the midterms feel like this hugely important thing, and it feels like we've rushed through it in one episode.
Yeah. I think it's because you'd normally have a time jump from, like, end of a series into start of a new series, but because we're like the same night continuing, it's like this is where we need to have the break in time that would normally happen between seasons.
You're so right. Also, I think that they're just like trying to skip a bunch of time to get Josh back in the office.
Yeah,
because I think they went to like start writing and they were like, oh, fuck, we can't have Josh in any of these scenes. Shit. Okay, let's just like jump a few months and then we can have him back.
Yeah.
Where is Joey Lucas?
Mandy?
Not a whisper. I just think they're never going to mention her again.
If you wanted to write her out, why would you not just kill her off?
Oh my God, it's so dramatic. This is a political drama, Leigh. Lee's like, telenovela brain is like, yeah, just like, I don't know, like, have her fall down a staircase. Whatever. Have her find a cursed amulet. What's wrong with this?
You literally just had a scene with a shooting.
So dark from you. But yeah, like, give her something.
Give her something.
Maybe her and Daisy went on a road trip. Maybe they went traveling to Europe.
Don't think Daisy is friends with her anymore. I wouldn't be friends with her anymore.
No, neither
we
would I.
Started a business and she immediately left to go work with her ex-boyfriend.
So true. On the same vein as Crazy Things, we're now at a radio host gala.
Oh my God, obsessed. I loved it from start to finish.
Which Charlie did mention to Jed earlier in the episode. Now, why are we out here and why is Aaron Sorkin reading radio hosts for absolute filth?
What did a radio host do to Aaron Sorkin?
Because
Aaron Sorkin hates the radio.
He truly does. Now, what a day to be a character actor. What a day for wardrobe and makeup.
What a day to be a day player.
What a day to be a day player. Now, in this sea of men, a woman walks in.
In a cape.
I didn't have the words for it, but yes. In what I would like to call an emerald green cape.
Truly.
And like a Mad Men January Jones bob.
So January Jones.
In fact, January Jones would have played that part really well.
Yeah.
If she hadn't have been 18 or something at the time.
Yeah.
We find they're like, oh, it's Jenna Jacobs. And there's something in CJ's face. And I'm like, ooh, why does Jenna Jacobs make CJ feel bad? More on that later. Quick bass touch with Jed and Toby.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, but like Martin Sheen just decided to be insane in this episode. Now he's now just he's not lying on his bed anymore. He's like reclining upon a sofa, drinking an egg cream, which is a gross name for a drink that contains neither egg nor cream. It's just like a fake milkshake, which is made with like syrup and soap. It sounds horrible. I'm sorry to the people of Boston. We'll find out for sure.
They'll be sure to let us know.
I would like to know if any listeners have ever had an egg cream and what their thoughts were. Thank you. Now, Jed is like, I love an egg cream. Now, he strikes me as a hyperfixator with food.
Yes. Because we did have the moment of Mrs. Landingham having to remind him that he's allergic to eggnog at Christmas.
Yes. But we do have a beautiful exchange, which is basically Toby being like, oh, that drink is a great drink. It's from like where I'm from. And just saying to Jed, there are some good things in this world that are not from New England.
Toby, never let me hear you say that again.
Now, Toby says to Jed, I'd like to take some time off. And then it's unclear if Jed refuses to let him have the time off or is like, no, like you have to get back to work. Like, this is what we do. We need to... It was unclear.
It was unclear. He kind of seemed to do both.
Yeah, again, being crazy. And while like reclining on a sofa with this egg cream,
with this egg cream,
he's like, it wasn't a shooting, Toby. It was a lynching. They tried to lynch Charlie right in front of our eyes. Can you believe that? Which is heavy. And I think like, given what Toby's come to talk to him about, I'm like, I don't know if this is the right time, Jed, to be like going in so hard. Like, I feel like we need to be having these conversations like with a mental health professional rather than like with the president of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I think what does feel good is that I think Jed is like acknowledging
that not everything
Toby,
is fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
That he too is like processing the gravity of what happened.
Yeah. I want to go back to, so just before Jed goes into that, Toby says, I've seen shootings before. And I just want us to put a pin in that in terms of the Toby backstory. Like, what shootings has Toby been present for?
Truly.
But I think, for me, I think if we're going to go all in on this being like an act of racial violence, I do feel like it's right for every character in this show to be forever changed.
Yes.
And it is having a lot of weight given to it.
Yes.
And it doesn't feel like any of the characters have come out of this with this like, wow, I survived. I don't think anyone has got that. I think everyone is kind of like, this is completely fucked. Why is this happening? Why can't we change this?
Yes.
And so I do feel like the decision to make this a threat on Charlie's life is kind of being handled with the gravitas that it should be.
I agree.
I'm really sorry, but we're going to have to go back to the radio thing.
Yes.
I don't know what's happening. CJ has been abandoned with these weird radio people.
Yes.
There's a lot of like chat about crab puffs.
And what, like Alaska crab puffs versus New Hampshire crab puffs.
Like, I wonder if someone in the writer's room was just high.
And then we learn why Jenna is so distressing to all present.
So Jed Bartlett enters the room and everyone like claps. And obviously like the president, so everyone stood up. And we see the green cape. And Jed starts like talking to the room and he's like giving his say. And then like you can see him clock her. And he just decides to go in. And it's like, oh, like Dr. Jenna Jacobs. Can I just ask, like, what are you a doctor of? Is it of politics? Is it of theology? Is it medical? And she's like, no, English literature. And he's like, oh, because you seem to give people a very high level of advice on your talk show. Like, you're speaking as if you're a doctor of theology. Like, you wear your doctor as if you are, it is one of the things that you talk about. And it turns out that she's like a really intense, homophobic, conservative, Republican talk show host.
She is costumed so well as a homophobic Republican. And I can't even fully, there's just this je ne sais quoi. I can't even fully express why it's so correct.
It's the particular shade of the green of the cape. And then also she has this little bejeweled, like crab brooch. Weirdly, why are we continuing the crab thing? That he's like, why do you have a problem with gay people? And she's like, well, because they sing in the Bible. And then Jed fucking schools her in the Bible.
It is so good.
I was like on the edge of my seat watching it. And he's like, these are all the things in the Bible that it also says you have to do. Do you do those things?
Can I burn my mother in a small family gathering for wearing garments made of 2 different threads?
For example. And then he says, one last thing. While you may be mistaking this for your monthly meeting at the ignorant tight-ass club, in this building, when the president stands, nobody sits.
It is the most glorious performance from Martin Sheen yet.
Fuck you, Dr. Tight-ass. It's incredible. And it's the fact that she is like sat there with her little plate of crab puffs. And she is the smallest person in that room now.
The decision to have her holding a plate of food was so good. For some reason, it makes it all the more humiliating that she's like eating their food while he's schooling her.
Yeah.
I will say my girlfriend Lizzie had earlier in the day before I watched this episode been like, is it supposed to be like about Republicans? And I was like, no, they're Democrats. And then she was like, well, do they actually say anything like about gay people? And then I got to this part of the episode and I like rewound it and I was like, Lizzie, would you like to come back into the room?
Would you like to rejoin us? The thing that kind of concludes from this moment, which is the reason why Jed is so stressed, is this whole pettiness about this school board thing is because the guy that he doesn't like has the same views as Jenna Jacobs. And that's why he doesn't want him to win. It's not because he just like doesn't want him to win. It's not pettiness. It's because he's like, I don't want children to grow up where that person is on the school board.
Yeah.
And that's why we love Jed. But should we close out really with just a moment with Mr. Mackintosh and his son and Charlie? So Charlie is like goes into his office and Mr. Mackintosh, the tech support guy, is like working on Mrs. Landingham's computer. Basically, like they have a little bit of a conversation. Charlie's like, oh, my mum worked nights because the little boy's like, I'm here because my mommy works nights. And we find out that Charlie's mum died only a year ago and that she was only working that particular shift because Charlie asked her to work that shift. And also Charlie's dad has died at some point in his life. So he is an orphan. So kind of what we come out of that scene with is the fact that like there's an element of Charlie and his grief about his mum where he feels responsible for her death, which is like if she wasn't on shift, she would still be alive and I made her take that shift. And I think there's an element of feeling responsible for Josh and for Jed. And like I feel like there's so much weight and grief on the shoulders of this man who is like 22 years old, who is responsible for the care of his little sister and probably works like 100 hours a week.
Yeah.
And I needed Mr. Mackintosh to like say all the things that he did. Because he says like, the thing is like, if they're shooting at you, you're probably doing something right. And I know that like that comment doesn't fix anything for Charlie. Like you can see it like hit him and it's not like he's like, oh, what a relief, you've made my life better. But I think it just like is a little moment of, like you say, like another black man being like, just I just want you to know that you're seen.
Yeah. Do I wish that was coming from like a strong recurring character?
Yes. Agreed.
Who Charlie had an existing relationship with? Yes. Do I wish they hadn't had to write in a new character for that episode in order to give Charlie that moment?
For sure.
For sure. But I'm still glad that they recognized the need to write that moment. I just wish it was coming from a character that was already existing in the world and part of the show.
We finished the episode on the steps of Josh's apartment, Leigh.
I loved this as a vibe.
It's very sitcom. And it was just like all of the like Toby and Sam and Donna and CJ and like they're all like holding beers and like leaning on the steps of his like little brownstone building. And Josh is like, I'm an outdoorsman. And Toby's just like, I think you're both freaks. And I feel like there's hope. Yeah. And we have the answer that in Congress, there are 7 Republicans and 5 Democrats that have been voted in. And so that's what it was before. So like everything has stayed the same, basically. So it's not massively dramatically interesting, but like actually kind of in the longevity of the show, like maybe that is better.
Yeah.
And that was the episode. Just like I feel it was nice to finish with like the gang.
Yeah. And a gorgeous tableau.
I feel like after such a lovely and warm kind of visual image on the steps of Josh's apartment.
Very much a Sex and the City image for me rather than a kind of West Wing image.
Yeah, it's giving a different TV show, you know?
Yeah.
But I don't hate it.
No, I don't hate it. It's giving, wow, our relationships as human beings has really developed since the start of season 1.
It's a very opening of season 2.
It feels very, oh my God, are we outside of work friends?
I just need someone to have been moving into a new apartment and just like walk in with a box full of their stuff and just be like, I'm home, you know?
Yeah.
But it's put me in a very mellow place for the rapid fires.
Let's do it. Let's go in. Best fashion.
I mean, I hate to give it to her, but it simply must go to Jenna Jacobs' cape.
I could not disagree more vehemently. It's a jewel tone, Fi. You're normally very against a jewel tone.
I'm not saying I like it. I'm not saying that it's acceptable. I'm saying that the best piece of costuming in that entire episode was the jewel-coloured, like emerald green cape and horrible sparkly crab pin.
I do need to mention CJ's white short-sleeved blouse paired with the wide-legged blue-grey trousers, which then there's a kind of long line blazer that gets put on over the blouse for her kind of more formal moment in the episode. Also, Margaret had like a pale green suit at one point, which with her red hair, I was just like, it's a wow. It's simply a wow.
It's giving Irish Wish.
Oh my God, what a film. What a film. Dear listener, if you've not indulged in the new Lindsay Lohan epic, An Irish Wish. Now, did they give the posh English character the line, "This is real Ireland," as opposed to any of the Irish characters in the film? Yes, they did. But it was so fantastic that I was willing to overlook that, actually.
Yeah, I think there's a very small number of films that exist in our reality which are so unbelievably batshit that they are in fact pieces of incredible cinema.
I support Lindsay Lohan in everything that she does.
Indeed.
I wish her luck in every endeavour.
I do. I truly do. What could a British or Irish politician never get away with, Leigh?
Yeah, absolutely schooling someone on the Bible.
Yeah,
but in somehow kind of a woke way. It was crazy.
I wish I'd typed out that scene, but I was just like, I'm not typing out stuff about the Bible. I'm afraid that's a line that I draw in the sand for myself personally. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's the way that Jed is like, oh, I've studied theology, but like in a kind of brat way, you know?
He is in his brat summer.
There's no way that scene should have been cool, but it really was. And in the hands of a British or Irish person, I think we're tipping over into ick.
Fully.
And we're tipping over into like a Jacob Rees-Mogg kind of place. I wish to stay far from that. How long until our big ticket bingo card items, guns, abortion, free speech, religion, etc. come up? I mean, for me, it's just tipping into, I know that we're still kind of covering gun control and high levels of racism in America, but I do think that really we've got to give it to the gays versus the Bible with Jenna Jacobs.
Always at all times, yes.
Yeah. And also a moment for us to be like, okay, Jed, if this is how you feel about it, why don't you say it on the record?
Please, the people are crying out for it.
Lol Lydell's dad needs this.
Yeah. A best writerly moment.
Best writerly moment.
I think it was clear in the way that I ate the crab puff that it was an act of protest.
A classic from Sam Seaborn, honestly. Like, I love him.
Yeah.
And I know, look, listeners, a lot of you know more about this show than we do. And I'm sure you're going to be there rolling your eyes being like, just you wait, Fi. He's an asshole. But for now, I love Sam Seaborn. I wish him to be in my friendship group.
He has my heart.
He has my heart in this moment. And I think for me, my best writerly moment was just Toby Ziegler on the stairs of Josh's apartment, just going, I think you're both freaks.
Yeah.
Because that's him. He's back. You know, he's been having a tough time.
He has.
But that's a classic zinger from him. Mm-hmm. Man, I feel like a man.
I'm an outdoorsman.
Well, I nearly did a spit take then. I think mine has to go to Jed Bartlett for Can You Believe I'm on Hold? And what was the moment that made you proudest to be an American?
One last thing. While you may have mistaken this for your weekly meeting at the Ignorant Tight Ass Club, in this building, when the president stands, nobody sits.
Now, I'll give you some reasons why this is incredible line. 1, because it's like the cherry on top of his argument with her. 2, because everyone in the room is like, fuck, that is embarrassing. And 3, he refers to himself in the third person.
It's giving Drag Race. Like, it just...
It is a read. Like...
Yeah.
It's queer
very
culture.
RuPaul.
Yeah. I think my moment that made me proudest to be an American, besides that one, was just the lads on Josh's apartment, just like cheersing, and their toast to being is just God bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her with a light that will shine from above.
It's good that we can be cheerful in such dark times. That's what I say. On that absolute bombshell, Leigh, shall we go into our study sesh for today? What are you going to teach me about?
Well, we have been kind of looking at like the political fallout, obviously, of the violence that we experienced between the season finale of season 1 and the opening of season 2. We're kind of looking at the political fallout of that.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be interesting to look at, in terms of real life, how assassination attempts on American presidents, presidential candidates, and high-powered members of executive office, how that has impacted the politics of the day.
Ooh.
Until Butler, Pennsylvania, July 13th, 2024, it had been decades without any assassination attempts on any high-level members of executive office. Following the failed assassination attempt on Andrew Jackson in 1835, the time between the shooting of Reagan and Trump was the longest period in American history in which a bullet had not been directed at a current or former president.
It's a shame that we had to bring that someone chose to bring that to an end.
Yeah, so there was a 43-year gap between the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan and the first assassination attempt, I should say, on Donald Trump. Obviously, famously, as we know now, within seconds, Donald Trump said, fight, 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 punched the air. And he quickly released a fundraising email on Sunday afternoon that read, "I am safe and well. Nothing will slow me down. I will never surrender." Trump wrote in an email that linked to a site allowing supporters to donate to his campaign, which is, of course, his own prerogative. And the kind of political bump, I suppose, that Trump experienced from that was very much kind of pushed by New York Representative Elise Stefanik when she released a statement kind of bringing up the idea that Trump had been spared by divine intervention.
Yes, there's quite a lot of chat about divine intervention going on in modern day America right now.
Yes. Our fave, Mike Johnson, of Covenant Eyes, famously of Covenant Eyes software, Speaker of the House, also suggested that there had been divine intervention involved, saying no leader in American history has endured more attacks and remained so strong and resilient. He is unstoppable.
It's kind of crazy that as Speaker of the House, you don't have to be neutral. That's just, I find that a very interesting thing.
Because that is very different from the way Parliament is run. Yes, absolutely. 5 days after the shooting, Trump at his Republican National Convention speech in Milwaukee vowed to never again mention the details of the assassination attempt.
He kind of has, though.
Famously, he has mentioned it quite a lot since. It's kind of played a recurring role in all of his rallies since then. A crowd in Erie listened to Trump talk about returning to the scene of the shooting, which he has described as a steadily growing tourist site.
Okay.
And famously, obviously, he did go back and finish his speech that he had just begun when the assassination attempt occurred. And he began his comments by saying, "As I was saying," which, what? I'll give credit where credit is due. That is kind of iconic.
That is quite good. Whoever in his team wrote that as the opener, fair play, lads.
Yeah, and I mean, the image of Trump with blood on his face as he thrusts his fist into the air has become an iconic image in American politics. His campaign kind of rushed to release T-shirts and flags and other pieces of merchandise with that photograph. And it's kind of become like an enduring metaphor for his supporters of his kind of fight to win. Now, to dive into kind of some of the historical context for what happened with Trump, in the pre-Civil War era, President Andrew Jackson was shot while attending a funeral at the Capitol. The shooter fired twice, but the gun failed.
Yeah, it wasn't like a great time for like gun reliability back then, was it?
No. Franklin D. Roosevelt was president-elect, so he'd not taken the oath of office yet, but he had been chosen by the people.
So that's like between November and January at some point.
Yes, they did shorten up the lame duck period between the election and when the new president is sworn in. I think at this point in 1933, the swearing in still did not happen until March, but it was moved up to January at a certain point, just because it felt like it was not a hugely productive time. But when the president is in their lame duck period, so it made sense for that time to be shorter. But FDR was shot at. The shooter missed Roosevelt, but did kill the Chicago mayor, Anton Cermak, at that event. And that assassination attempt was very much fueled by the frustration that a lot of Americans were feeling at the time due to the Great Depression.
Yeah.
But what is interesting is that FDR's vice president was a more conservative Southern Democrat, and he did not actually support, in the end, many of FDR's New Deal programs. So had that attack been successful, we likely would not have had the New Deal.
I learnt about the New Deal in my GCSE history module.
We love to see it.
A big dam. There was a big dam made.
Correct.
The Hoover Dam.
Correct, yes.
Okay, that's it. That's all I've got. Continue.
I mean, yeah, the American history is just absolutely like storied with assassination attempts on presidential candidates and presidents. Harry Truman was shot at. Alabama Governor George Wallace was running for president for a third time when he was also shot at, and actually that attack left him paralyzed from the waist down. He was a segregationist at the time that he was shot at, but he did later rethink that viewpoint and those politics, which we love to see some personal growth.
Yeah, we do.
Gerald Ford faced 2 assassination attempts in quick succession in 1975. But to the assassinations that did actually occur, obviously we have Abraham Lincoln was the first president to die by assassination. He was shot in the back of the head in 1865 during an appearance at Ford's Theatre in Washington, D.C. by John Wilkes Booth, an actor in the play who was a Southern sympathizer and white supremacist.
That'll do it.
That'll do it, absolutely. President James Garfield was shot in a train station in Washington, D.C. in 1881. He died from his wounds a couple of months later. And he was
getting shot in the 1800s, like...
It must have been horrific.
Because,
getting shot at any time is obviously horrific, but at a time before, like, general anesthetic.
Yeah, like, when we've not had the kind of like real boom in modern medicine at that point. So like, he died several months later of his wounds.
It's an infection. Yeah.
Oof. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Horrible. But what was interesting is that the person who shot James Garfield was actually a disaffected former supporter with mental illness who was angry following his support not getting a job in the Garfield administration. So the political fallout of James Garfield's assassination was that very heavy rules came into place that being a patron of a presidential candidate does not translate into becoming a staff member in the West Wing.
So there was like a bit of an argument before then of like, if you give enough money, we'll put you in a job.
And like, money should buy you political sway.
Yeah.
Which obviously, as we learned in our Dark Money episode, is, I suppose, still happening to a certain extent, but it's not like, as your patron, I now get an official advisor role. That's when those rules came into place. Now, what is interesting also is President William McKinley was assassinated in 1901 in Buffalo, New York by an anarchist. And what is interesting about President McKinley's assassination is that his assassination led to the creation of the modern Secret Service.
Ooh, I mean, obviously, like, terrible way for something to come about, the death of someone. But like, that's really interesting that like, so in terms of modern Secret Service, are we, is that the whole umbrella?
So before McKinley's death, presidential security was like quite piecemeal. It wasn't really like formalized in any way. And what eventually became the Secret Service was originally a branch of the Treasury Department that was created to investigate counterfeit currency. Whereas after President McKinley's death, that's when, for the first time, the President of the United States had a dedicated permanent security detail.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. And then, as we've discussed before, obviously, JFK was killed by a sniper in 1963. And his successor, the Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, who was, as we've mentioned before, only 3 cars behind Kennedy in the motorcade. So it was very confusing at first as to whether LBJ had also been caught up in the shooting. Thankfully, he wasn't. But LBJ took advantage of the outpouring of sympathy after JFK was killed to push through the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, which was something that JFK had been struggling to get through Congress before he'd been assassinated. But LBJ was able to use the kind of surge of political support after JFK was assassinated to get through those like really historic and important pieces of legislation, obviously, that are currently being hacked away at the present day, which is horrifying. But that, I think that's an instance where obviously a horrific and tragic incident has led to some really, really important change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, let's to Ronald Reagan.
Please, because I'm so interested about this one, because I didn't even know. I didn't even know.
Yes. You can actually, there is, and I'll put this in our Patreon for any Patreon subscribers who are interested, but there is news reporting. I mean, it happened in front of the cameras. So you can, on YouTube, you can see it happen.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's crazy. But there was an attempt on President Reagan's life in 1981. He was only 70 days into his presidency at the time. And he was addressing a union meeting in the Washington Hilton Hotel. Now, we talked about the Brady Bill when we were talking about gun control in season 1. And obviously, the Brady Bill was in honor of Jim Brady, who was at this time President Reagan's press secretary. So his CJ Craig, if you will. Rick Ahern, who was his like leading advance man for that event, has said, I saw Jim Brady, who was a good friend of mine, go down like a sack of potatoes. I remember vividly he was carrying a paper pad in his left hand and a pen in his right hand, or vice versa. And he just went face down. He made no attempt to break his fall. He was obviously wounded. When I ran over to him and knelt down next to him, his face was down on the sidewalk next to a grate and he was trying to get up. He was trying to speak, and as he turned his head, I could see the bullet had entered his left forehead and pretty much devastated his head. So I immediately pulled out my pocket handkerchief and tried to staunch the bleeding and hold his head together. I remember shouting, does anybody have a handkerchief, please? Because there were no medics and no ambulances in the area. David Prosperi stepped up and just silently handed me a handkerchief, and I thanked him profusely.
Oh.
Rick Ahern, who has since worked for 6 US presidents, said that the incident did not change his mind on gun control. He said, I think that we have ample gun laws on the books right now, and if we enforce those more stringently, there'd be less guns in the hands of people who shouldn't have them. Now, David Prosperi, who Rick Ahern mentioned, was assistant press secretary at the time. So he was there to manage the White House press pool that day. And he said, I see there's a Washington police officer, Thomas Delahanty, lying on the ground. He was shot. Tim McCarthy, who was a Secret Service agent and a member of the president's protective detail, was shot. And finally, there was Jim Brady lying face down on the ground with a bullet wound in his head. Rick Ahern, the leading advance man for the visit, was kneeling down next to Jim Brady, and he's holding a handkerchief to Jim's head, trying to staunch the bleeding. Rick yelled at me, do you have a handkerchief? Because of the blood. I had a handkerchief my grandmother had given me, so I threw it at Rick and then ran into the hotel because I needed to call the White House. At this time, obviously, we're in 1981, David Prosperi, none of these people had cell phones. None of them had a mobile phone. And the bank of payphones in the hotel were all in use. So he managed to find one that was operated by credit card and used his personal credit card to alert the White House press office. And he says, from my understanding, that's how the White House found out that the president had been shot, because the Secret Service at that time hadn't yet determined if Ronald Reagan had been hit.
Yes, because he was sort of bundled into a car. Because there was the conversation about the connection between the scene between Ron and Jed Bartlett at the start of episode 1 being kind of similar to accounts of Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, so what you can kind of see if you watch it is that one Secret Service agent is like throwing Ronald Reagan into the car, and then the other Secret Service agent is using his body as a human shield for the president.
Yeah.
So you really can't see if Ronald Reagan gets hit. Of course, we know that he did get hit. And meanwhile, the whole White House press corps is behind a rope line, seeing this whole thing.
Yeah.
And David Prosperi was the one who had to address everything, whilst he still did not have the information. And so all of the press corps are asking David Prosperi, because obviously his boss, the press secretary, has been shot.
Yeah.
They're asking, has the president been shot? And David Prosperi is saying the president was shot at. I can't confirm if he was shot. And then obviously we have the famous line from Ronald Reagan when he walked into the hospital. And so everyone thought that he was
fine,
not shot. And then famously he quipped to Nancy Reagan when she got there, "I'm sorry, honey, I forgot to duck."
It's quite Jed coded, isn't it?
It's quite Jed coded. And you can kind of see where a lot of like Jed's quipping in the hospital is like kind
its
of being
origins
inspired
come
by.
from, yeah.
And when he was being operated on, he said to his surgeon, Joseph Giordano, who was a liberal Democrat, "I hope you're all Republicans." And his surgeon replied, "Today, sir, we're all Republicans."
That's very good. That is very good.
About how the assassination attempt impacted Ronald Reagan, David Prosperi went on to say his personal style of leadership endeared him to people on both sides of the aisle, not only in Congress but around the country. And I saw that from traveling with him for over a year. Did the assassination attempt add to that? Absolutely. And I think the president and his team were smart enough to realize that here was an opportunity for his brand to demonstrate leadership and put forth ideas that he had always believed in, but now would perhaps have a greater chance of enacting because of his popularity. I believe to this day, if not for the assassination attempt, Jim Brady would probably have been one of the best ever White House press secretaries. He had a way of dealing with the media. He had a good sense of humor. Back then, he understood how to get the president's messages out, and I think it was a tragedy he wasn't given a chance to really demonstrate his full capabilities.
It's quite the eulogy, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, so Jim Brady spent 239 days in hospital. He never returned to his position as White House press secretary, but he kept the title for the remainder of Reagan's presidency. And when he died in 2014, the medical examiner ruled it a homicide resulting from the injury that he had incurred in 1981. Now, what is interesting in terms of the 25th Amendment that we were discussing before is that while the president was in hospital, while Ronald Reagan was being operated on, the vice president, George H. Bush, at the time, he was on a plane coming back from Texas.
Okay.
So there's no communication. There's no secure phone line to a plane in 1981.
No.
So thus, we're like, who's in charge? Nobody knows.
Yeah. Because even if Reagan signs the memo, George doesn't know that he's in charge. And also no one can talk to him whilst he's in the air.
Yeah. So then this leads to Al Haig, the Secretary of State, just kind of announcing that he was in charge. Which is not true because he's fourth in the line of succession after the Senate President pro tempore and the Speaker of the House. But because people thought in the moment that the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan might be a Soviet plot, he was like, this is...
I'm the closest to what we've been talking about, and I'm more briefed on some things. So we might be at war in a few hours type thing.
He basically wrongly declared himself the acting president and told the Reagan's cabinet in the White House Situation Room, the helm is right here. And that means right in this chair for now, constitutionally, until the vice president gets here. He then asked, how do you get to the press room? Raced upstairs, went directly to the lectern before a television audience of millions, and famously declared, I'm in control here in the White House.
It's just a very male thing to do, you know? And I don't wish to be that derivative, but
Yeah.
I think I'm correct.
Now, what is interesting is 7 years before, he's kind of widely credited with like holding everything together in the period before Nixon went. He was like really key to kind of making sure that everything was still running.
Yeah.
And so William B. Saxby, who was the United States Attorney General at that time, said he was the president towards the end. He held that office together. So I guess in a way, he's kind of like, well, I'm just stepping into what I did before. But obviously that legally
is
held no water whatsoever.
Because that's the thing. Even in that episode when like Hoynes is floundering, and he looks to Leo and he's like, Leo, what should we do? Like, Leo probably is the best briefed person to be making the decisions. But like you say, legally that doesn't hold any water. So it's really, the 25th Amendment is very interesting.
Super, super, super interesting. And he basically went into the White House press room and said, constitutionally, gentlemen, you have the president, the vice president, and the secretary of state in that order. And should the president decide he wants to transfer the helm to the vice president, he will do so. As of now, I am in control here in the White House. And it's like, you've forgotten two people between you and the succession. And basically, in the 30 years since, that day has ruined Al Haig's own presidential ambitions.
Oh, yeah, no, it would. Because it's basically, unfortunately, showing that he doesn't understand Constitution.
And it also is showing that he's very quick to kind of make a power grab. National Security aide Donald P. Gregg described Mr. Haig as a cobra among garter snakes.
Oh, what a really fun, like classy and like frisky little metaphor or analogy. Which one is that?
Richard V. Allen, who was chief foreign policy advisor at the time, was literally like swimming laps at the pool when the assassination attempt occurred and was like yanked out of the pool and pulled into the Situation Room. And he was like immediately, as soon as he got into the Situation Room, he was like, I'm tape recording everything that happens in this room.
Ooh.
And so he recorded the whole thing, and he was like, it wasn't a secret. Like everyone could see the tape recorder on the table, like everyone knew. And in his recording, you can hear as Al Haig is running out into the press room to be like, I'm in control. You can hear the rest of the cabinet and senior administration officials, one yelling, that's a mistake. Then Treasury Secretary Don Reagan, what's this all about? Is he mad? Then Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger, he's wrong. He doesn't have such authority.
That's quite fun. And this is in a post-Watergate world, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So everyone's just like, we're recording everything.
Al Haig took the helm during Watergate, yeah. And then basically Vice President Bush kind of came back in and took control of the kind of crisis management situation and kind of took over, and everything kind of calmed back down again. And yeah, basically Reagan did get like in the overnight after the assassination attempt, Reagan's approval rating went up by 13 points. But within a week, he lost half of those popularity gains. And then 2 months later, his approval rating was actually lower than it had been before the assassination attempt.
Wow.
But obviously the long-term impact of the assassination attempt was the Brady Bill, which was the most sweeping gun reform legislation passed by Congress to date. In 1991, Ronald Reagan penned an op-ed for the New York Times in support of the Brady Bill, despite the fact that that was happening under Democrat Bill Clinton.
Well, I guess it would have been an insane thing for him not to support that when it was like named after his press secretary.
Absolutely. Just to leave on a slightly lighter note than the Reagan assassination, let's go to Teddy Roosevelt.
Shall we?
What a vibe. Because Donald J. Trump is not the first former president to survive an assassination attempt while trying to get his old job back, or indeed mid-speech. On the 14th of October 1912, Theodore Roosevelt was shot just before he was scheduled to go on stage at a Milwaukee campaign event. Roosevelt, who was 53 at the time, was saved by a metal eyeglass case and the fat text of his own speech, which was 50 pages, which was in like his breast pocket.
Whoa. Like in a war film when someone's like Bible stops the bullet. Wow.
Yeah. But even though the bullet slowed down, it still penetrated his chest. He was still like bleeding from his chest. And the bullet stayed in his body for the rest of his life.
What?
But absolute icon that he is, Teddy Roosevelt gave a 90-minute speech anyway with the bullet in his chest, telling the crowd, I don't know whether you fully understand that I've been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose.
Wow. Now, hold on to your hats, guys. I've got 90 minutes of content to get through.
Fully bleeding from the chest. And the bullet was headed straight for his heart before stopping lodged against a rib 4 inches from the sternum.
Whoa.
Roosevelt, like Mr. Trump, was trying to stage a comeback, running 4 years after moving out of the White House. But unlike Trump, Roosevelt had left office voluntarily, declining to run in 1908 after serving 2 terms, and had kind of put forward his protege, President Taft. But then 4 years later, they'd had a bit of a falling out. So Roosevelt decided to challenge Taft in the primary. Unfortunately, Taft beat him for the Republican nomination at the GOP convention. And then Roosevelt kind of made his own party, the Progressive Party, so that he could still run. But then he split the Republican vote with Taft. And then the Democrat, Woodrow Wilson, actually got in.
Just a little lesson to be learnt about ego there, perhaps, gents.
Yeah, but I think it kind of cemented his legacy as like tough as nails, that he got shot and then did his speech anyway.
Yeah, stunning.
So yeah, in summation, assassination attempts on presidents, they have, led to certain policy initiatives that have been really powerful and really important being able to be put forward kind of in the immediate aftermath. But in terms of long-term impact on a president's popularity, it really just feels like it's a very short-term boost, and then it's kind of back to business as usual. So it's just a question of what a president is able to get through in the kind of immediate aftermath.
Yeah. Very interesting. I didn't realize that there were so many assassination attempts. They kind of just focus in the UK on JFK, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Leigh, I'm very excited for next week.
Yes, me too.
I feel so good that we're back in the saddle,
Absolutely.
Scared for the future, but excited about our podcast.
Very excited, yes.
So yeah, let's do this again next week.
Please do reach out with any stupid questions you'd like us to talk about on queergalswatch@gmail.com. Give us a follow on the socials @queergalswatch. We just love hearing from you.
Yeah, and
it's really nice.
Have a little wander over to our Patreon. If you fancy it, just have a little
look.
We
love our patrons. We so appreciate you.
Yeah, we love you guys. I'm going to go off and probably do some intense Google searching about Ronald Reagan.
Yeah. Always fascinating.
Always more to find out. Okay, I'll see you next week.